to tell you about how unleashing my inner artist changed my life, and how unleashing yours could change the world. It started when I was a neighborhood reporter for a weekly independent newspaper. I liked my job. I wouldn't consider journalism a form of creative writing. It's more of a science. You do your research, you ask your questions, you check your facts, you check your grammar. My editor gave me the assignment of checking out the local slam poetry scene that was bubbling up in the city. When I walked into that crowded downtown cafe that night, I was a reporter on assignment. But when I left, I was a poet. I did not expect to fall in love with slam poetry that night. But I was drawn in by these passionate people of all ages and backgrounds, stepping up to a microphone, sharing their innermost thoughts, revealing their most personal stories. They gave it their all, holding nothing back, weaving emotions and imagery with their words. And when it was over, when they had spilled their hearts and guts on stage, 5 random strangers assigned a numerical score to their art. I was hooked by the absurdity of it all. I needed to be part of this. Performing slam poetry is hard. You have to dig deep. You have to confront things that maybe you don't like about yourself. You explore topics that people just don't often talk about. But the high you get when you perform a poem you love is like nothing else. When the audience is with you, you get a rush that lasts for days. Just being in a room where a poetry slam is happening can create a spark. You often see at poetry readings people in the audience who are listening to the poetry. They never even step up to a microphone, but they're scribbling madly in their own notebooks. This couldn't have been any more different from my world in the newsroom. At work, I felt like I needed to keep my poetry a secret. I was essentially living a double life. I was covering my local news beat on one side, and on the other side, I was funneling all of my creativity into my poetry. Ultimately, poetry gave me the courage to try other artistic mediums that I'd always wanted to do, music and acting. I started singing in 2 bands and acting with local theater groups whenever I could. Poetry even inspired me to try a new career path, leaving journalism for the world of public relations. Now, one might assume that my new PR career took a hit since so much of my creative time and energy was going into these side projects outside of work, but that's not what happened. Instead, my new career kicked into overdrive. I felt energized, bold, willing to take more risks. I spoke out in meetings, I contributed more ideas, and I felt less anxiety when I walked into a room full of strangers to pitch a new business. And the best side effect of all was that the people I worked with responded so well to this creative energy I brought with me to work every day that they were coming up with amazing ideas and new ways to achieve success too. It reminded me of the people that I'd see in the audience at poetry slams, inspired to write in their notebooks. We were catching fire from each other's sparks, and we were putting out some of the best work I'd ever done. But then, my creative wave crashed. I took a more senior management position that required much longer work hours, leaving me with a lot less free time. And as a result, I had to put away my creative projects. During that 1.5 years, I began to notice that my work just wasn't the same. It was fine, and the clients were happy, but that irreverence, that edginess, that think big spirit, was lacking. All of this got me thinking. I wanted to figure out if there was a link between my work performance and the creative stuff. Was it possible that unleashing my artist was helping me excel in other areas of my life, and that diminishing her was lessening my work? Well, some scientists from Germany did a project that seemed to support my theory. They took a group of retired senior citizens, and then one half of the group, they had them attend an art appreciation lecture, and the other half of the group participated in a hands-on art class. After 10 weeks, the group that participated in the hands-on class showed significantly higher improvement in complex brain function. And a study by NeuroImage that same year showed that creativity physically alters the structure of your brain. Artists have more gray matter in the region of the brain associated with complex motor skills, information processing, decision-making, spatial visualization, and memory. And gray matter is a good thing, especially because the loss of it has been linked to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So, unleashing your artist, letting her off the chain, it can make you a better employee, give you a better brain, and even fight the effects of aging. But how can it change the world? Right now, companies like Apple, Google, Tesla, Amazon, they are at the top of their industries because they understand the value of the creativity necessary to foster innovation. Innovation. New products, new ideas, new technologies. That has the power to transform. A perfect example of this is Jonathan Ive, who was just this week promoted to Chief Design Officer at Apple. He's the man behind the revolutionary design of all those products you love. The iPhone, the iPad, the new Apple Watch. Steve Jobs' widow once described Jonathan as an artist with an artist's temperament, whatever that means. 100,000 Apple employees, stockholders, an entire app economy is dependent upon this artist's temperament. I'd love to see that guy's gray matter. Innovation will help us cure diseases, save the planet, become better versions of ourselves. And when I say artist, I don't just mean someone who has devoted their life to making it their profession. I'm also talking about the man in the cubicle across from yours who spends every Friday night in his basement banging out original jazz compositions. Or the special ed teacher who writes the most moving poetry you've ever heard in your life. Or the UPS driver who can hit high notes like Freddie Mercury. It doesn't matter if it's your profession or not. If you've ever made something beautiful or shocking or heartbreaking out of nothing, then I have news for you. You're an artist. Tapping into that artist, allowing her to run free, explore, innovate, will improve your life in ways that will astound you. And when you find a place that not only encourages your artistry, but considers it an asset, that is where the magic happens. My current PR agency hired me because of, in my boss's words, your autistic edge. They actually like that I sing in bands and compete in poetry slams. And when they told me this, I knew. I found my people. I was home. Maybe you've buried your artist, locked her away for many years. Maybe you thought you weren't good enough, or someone told you that it wasn't practical. Or maybe you thought, since you're not going to pursue it professionally, that there's no point in doing it anymore. I want you to know that your inner artist is your most valuable asset to yourself and to the world. Maybe you're wondering how to begin your journey. It's not as easy for everyone as just walking into a cafe one night and seeing your destiny. And it can be scary to dive into something new where your abilities will be challenged. In the slam world, it's customary for a poet to just walk off the stage when they're done with their poem. You rarely see a poet hanging around for applause, taking a bow, or waiting for the judges to deliver their scores. They usually just walk straight into the supportive arms of their fellow poets. There's a saying in slam poetry that the points don't matter, that the point is poetry. And that's what I want you to remember about your own inner artist. Be kind to her, especially when you're just starting out. I'm going to close with a poem that I wrote to remind myself to be kind to my inner artist. We can be our own worst critics when we begin a new creative project. I know that's the case for me. I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to start and that the points don't matter. Remember, you're a mountain. When we were smaller than stones and the world turned more slowly, we would scramble to the highest places we could find. Jungle gyms, treetops, hillsides, always perched on top, fists on hips, chin tilted into the wind. The sun on our forehead drove us higher. It never occurred to us that we could feel the sting of the hard ground until we fell. Bones against earth, breath pushed out in short, sharp cries. Some of us never attempted the climb again in favor of lower places. But those of us who did uncurled our bodies and rose up. Red clay dirt still clinging to our backs. We didn't play king of the mountain. We were the mountain. When I've been low too long, it's easy to start shrinking. When my lips are centimeters from a microphone and I breathe in and the room falls still, all I can hear is my frightened rabbit heart rattling in its cage. Blood pouts, throbbing in my ears. And I'm trying to remember who I was before I knew what it felt like to fall. You were raised to be mountains, ancient, steadfast, pine tree needles tickling your skin, cumulus clouds for your pillows. You were born with the kind of posture that starts a conversation. You are seismic just below the surface, but on the outside, fierce, unmoved. Your complexion born from fire and springs. Tears erode and give way to obsidian mind, granite veins, red emerald heart. At this altitude, your face is on every picture postcard. Wish you were here, they all say. When the wind whispers in your hair of the hard ground below, when the moon on your forehead warns of red clay dirt failure, when your breath comes in short, hard stops, plant your feet in the earth and speak clearly like mountains tend to do, fierce, unmoved.